Just let me hear some of that rock and roll music. Any old way you choose it.
Hello, this is Katie with Vintage and Vinyl, and I'll be spinning some rockin' 50s records every week here on my channel, as well as sharing some cool Coca-Cola collectibles and other neat vintage finds. Stay tuned! Hey guys, this is Katie with Vintage and Vinyl, back with another great video for you today. And in this video, I am channeling my inner 1950s housewife, because today we are going to be making Food with a Flair Miracle Whip recipes from the 1959 Better Homes and Gardens magazine that I got from Crafty Jackie. So I've got my Starburst brooch on, and I've got my scarf from my grandmother, and I'm all ready to go and whip up some recipes. So let me grab my apron and we'll get to cooking. Stay tuned. So I've got my apron here, guys, and if you have not been following me on Instagram or on YouTube, I've been talking quite a bit about these recipes because I do find them very fascinating. Jell-O molds themselves are pretty nasty looking, and I don't mean any offense to anyone that grew up in the 50s and ate this and enjoyed it, but personally I don't think certain things belong in Jell-O, like Miracle Whip. Miracle Whip is a salad dressing. It's not actually mayonnaise, nor is it anything that belongs in Jell-O. So that's going to be very interesting to try. And also there's a casserole we'll be making with Miracle Whip and sweet peas and mushrooms and all kinds of other ingredients like ham and onions. So that's got to be really, really strange. I like all of those ingredients, but they don't really belong together, I don't think. So I will be trying all of this live on my YouTube channel tonight at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So please, guys, tune into that if you want to see me upchuck all of this weird, strange 50s food, because let me just show you the magazine ad, and I think you would agree with me that this is not something that is suitable for people to actually eat, because oh my word, y'all, this just does not look very appetizing. So get ready to see some really strange 1950s food. Here it is, Miracle Whip, Food with a Flair, and look at that Jell-O mold, and our show-off casserole is right there. Oh my goodness, that's gotta be something that really shouldn't go together. So here we are, there's our recipe, and then here's the magazine, Better Homes and Gardens. Now this recipe also calls to make parsleyed rice with it. And I'm not going to go to the trouble and actually make the parsleyed rice, because I think honestly this stuff is fine on its own. So we're going to have a main course and dessert with the Jell-O mold. Now I want to mention a few things about this recipe. One of the things the Jell-O mold wanted was they wanted real cherries, and our store was out of them, so I couldn't get real cherries, but I did get maraschino cherries as a replacement, which I think will work just fine. Also, they wanted a can of chopped mushrooms. Our store didn't have that either. So we will be mixing part cream of mushroom and part celery soup together and see how that goes. So we should be able to get away with that just fine. So I'm also going to be using this Jell-O mold. Now in the recipe they wanted you to use one of those high, tall Jell-O molds. I don't have one of those. I do collect Jell-O molds, as you can see behind me, but I don't have one of the old, tall Jell-O molds. So I will be using my biggest Jell-O mold here with the grapes, and this should work just fine. Now I have lined this with wax paper. The reason I did that is because I've heard my grandmother tell the story about how one of her family members couldn't get the Jell-O mold out once she made it. The Jell-O wouldn't come out of the mold, and she ended up running hot water over the mold, and the whole Jell-O thing just melted. So I don't want to have that happen to me, so I'm going to be creative and use wax paper. It does not say to do that, and we're going to see if that actually works. So the first thing we're going to make today is the Jell-O mold. Reason being is it takes about 4 hours or more to set up, and I do want to have this ready for the live event tonight, so I will go ahead and get the Jell-O mold ready, and then we'll work on the show-off casserole. Now the first step in making the Jell-O mold, pictured here in the Food with a Flair Miracle Whip advertisement, is it wants you to make Jell-O to the box directions. And I do have a box of Jell-O here, just plain red Jell-O. Again, I'm not sponsored by Miracle Whip or Jell-O. This just happens to be a fun recipe that I wanted to try. So I'm going to make this. I am going to cut it down a little bit because it makes a lot and I don't need that much for this mold. So we will be doing about half of this instead of the whole box. The first thing it wants on the box for us to do is get a cup of boiling water together. So I'm going to fill a pot with a cup of boiling water and I'll be right back. Stay tuned. Okay guys, we've got our pot of boiling water here, 1 cup. And we have a cup of cold water. Now I will go ahead and just make all the Jell-O and then only use about half of it in the mold or so. Because I actually like Jell-O by itself, so I won't mind eating the rest of this. So it will go to a good home. Okay, let's get our water combined with the Jell-O powder. I've already poured the packet of just Jell-O mix into this bowl here, and I'm gonna mix everything together. Here goes the hot water, and then the cold water. And then it says to give it a good stir. So that is what we're going to do next, is give this a good stir together. And then of course it says to put it in the fridge to set. But what we're going to do is add some of these other things to the Jell-O and pour it into the mold. That way it will all set up together. So the first ingredient in our Jell-O mold is a can of mandarin oranges. So I have some mandarin oranges here. Now it doesn't say whether you need to drain the can or not, but I'm assuming that you need to drain the can. So I'm just going to go ahead and pour that out into the sink here. Probably don't need all that extra liquid since the Jell-O itself is already liquidy. So in goes 1 can of mandarin oranges. We also need a can of sliced peaches, so that's what's going to go in here next. And again, I'm going to drain this can, that way we don't have any extra liquid on the inside. So peaches, draining. And then the last thing that it wants you to add to the Jell-O mold is the cherries. So I've got some maraschino cherries here. I'm going to go ahead and open this jar, if I can get it open. There we go. And I'm going to put them into the Jell-O. Now my hands are clean, so I can do this. And I'm probably going to use my spatula here to just get out some of the cherries and put them into the mold. Now these are just standard maraschino cherries that you can get at the store without the stems. Of course, you don't want the stems in the Jell-O mold, so that is something to be aware of. And if you use fresh cherries, like the recipe says, you can chop those up or leave them whole if you want, as long as you get out the seeds. So I think that's equal amount of cherries to all the other things that we have in the mold. So I'm just sort of eyeballing that, and I'm going to mix this together. Just stir it into my bowl. And by the end of it, right now, you should have something like this, where it's liquid with all the stuff inside. Now, what I'm going to do is pour this into the Jell-O mold, and then we will put it in the refrigerator to set up so it gets nice and jelly and hard. So I'm going to put the mold down and pour it in. I'm probably afraid that this is going to go everywhere. Let's see. Oh, actually, it's going pretty well. Of course, you know, Jell-O splashes, so you gotta watch out for that. Okay, let's see. The one thing that I did not consider with this Jell-O mold, and it's something that you might want to consider as well, is if you're going to use a Jell-O mold that's got something on the bottom, like a design that is kind of uneven, it's not going to sit flat in the fridge, so you might have to set this in another bowl. So I'm actually going to pour some more Jell-O in because I think actually all of this is going to end up fitting in the mold. I was kind of surprised about that, but yep, it all fits. And I'm just going to kind of distribute the fruit evenly around so that we're not getting one whole section of cherries and one whole section of peaches and that kind of thing. And then I'm going to set it down in this bowl here, like this. And I'm going to take it to the fridge and let it set up. Now, I'm going to read the instructions again because I don't believe that you're supposed to cover it. Yes, it doesn't say to cover it, so I don't think it needs to be covered. You can just set it in your fridge like this. So I'll be back in just a minute and we'll get working on the show-off casserole. Okay guys, we're ready to start the show-off casserole. This is the casserole that's in the divided dish in this magazine here with the parsleyed rice. So we'll be making that. Now it has some very strange ingredients in it. Again, Miracle Whip, which just does not belong, I don't think, in a casserole. Now for the Jell-O recipe, I did mention it has Miracle Whip in it, and it does, but we wait until the end to top it with Miracle Whip. So when I get ready to serve it, I will add the Miracle Whip. So let's get into this recipe a little bit. Now, it mentions here that you need to bring all of this to serve warm. So eventually we will be heating this up. And the first thing that it wants us to do is use half a cup of Miracle Whip. So I have good old Miracle Whip here and a half a cup measuring spoon, and we will get into that right now. So I've got a spoon so that I can serve this out into the half cup measure. I don't think this is going to fit inside there, so let me get a spoon. So you definitely need a spoon if you're going to do this, and something I didn't think about. The mayo jar that I usually use, because I'm a big fan of Duke's, again, Miracle Whip isn't mayo, it's actually a salad dressing, but still the mouth of the jar is wide enough to do that. So you want to just put it in there and then kind of scoop it across the top to get a nice even measurement in your cup here. And you want to use a dry measuring cup for this, not a wet measure cup. Okay, a half a cup of Miracle Whip in a big bowl. I've got my mixing bowl right here. Then in goes a can of sweet peas. So 1 can of sweet peas. That's going to go into this, and again you want to drain the peas. I don't wash them or anything because all the flavor is already on the peas, so there's no need to rinse them off unless you don't like all that salt. So we're going to dump that into the bowl with the Miracle Whip. It also wants you to add here a whole can of celery soup. So this is a whole 10-ounce can, 10.5 ounces to be exact, of celery soup, and we are going to add that right into the bowl. Now I'm also going to add some cream of mushroom so that we can get our mushrooms in this recipe, because our store was out of the canned mushrooms when I went to get the ingredients for this. So our can of cream of celery is in the bowl, and we're also going to use some cream of mushroom to get that mushroom flavor. So here's the mushroom soup going in. Oh man, guys, I don't know how this sauce already looking really gross. I mean, it's just a lot of random stuff in the bowl. So I'm going to give that a little bit of a stir, get things mixed up there, and then we'll add the rest of the ingredients. So far, this is what we got going on, and it doesn't look the best, I'll be quite honest with you. Okay, so the next thing that we need to add is some chopped pepper and chopped onion. So I got some onion here and some pepper, so onion and pepper, and we're going to get that chopped and added. Now it does say with the onion that you only need a tablespoon of it, so not very much, very small amount. but you need more of the pepper, so it actually wants 2 tablespoons of the pepper, and of course all of this is finely diced. So I'm going to show you a trick. If you guys haven't cut onions before, I'm going to pan the camera down here and show you a little quick trick on how you can cut onions, because there is a really easy way to cut onions if you've never cut onions before. So we will do that coming right up. Okay guys, so I have taken the core out of the peppers. You don't want to leave the seeds in, and you don't want any of that white part. So I have just removed that from this pepper, and I'm going to finely chop it. And you do want things to be in even slices. So that's important that you get everything roughly the same size so that you don't have any issues when cooking. Nothing cooks unevenly. That's why everything should be a small dice in this recipe, and then you can go back and finely chop it. So we'll just start with that small dice, and we will get that all ready to go. So roughly the same size. Again, with the end pieces, it might not be exactly perfect, but that's okay. Don't worry about that. Okay, so that's roughly more than a tablespoon, I would say, but we'll chop this up nice and fine and get this into the bowl. So I'm just going to give this a rough chop here, and we'll get that going. Now you can be really precise and measure this out with a measurer if you would like, with a tablespoon measurer, but I'm just going to kind of do this by eye because I've been cooking so long that I do know about what a tablespoon is, and this is probably about a tablespoon worth of onions here. So I'm just going to put that not onions, into the bowl, and then I will save these peppers for another time. So we'll just move that off to the other side, and we'll get our onions all chopped up. So here's my trick for cutting up onions. If you guys have never cut up an onion before, what you want to do is cut off this end, not this end. This is the hairy end, and that's going to hold your onion together. So we're going to chop off this end and make a flat surface. That way it doesn't roll around on our cutting board. And then you want to cut through the hairy end long ways like that. So you have 2 halves. That makes a perfect way to peel an onion, because now we have this great little corner and we can peel back the first layer of the onion. And I always like to take off this first layer because I think it really gets rid of all the skin and all the other issues with the onion. So now you have a nice clean onion. Again, you don't need that much, so I'm going to save this other half for another time. Now what you want to do is hold your onion steady, and you want to make slices at an angle like this through your onion, but not through your hairy end. This is kind of funny to explain. Of course, it makes you cry too a little bit when you're cutting an onion. But see how I'm just making slices like that? And they're all going to be even. So you want your slices to be even on the onion. And then you're going to take your knife and you're going to cut through the onion like so. And you really should have your hand flat against the top. And you're going to do another cut up at the top like that. And now you can just dice your onion very easily, and you have perfect onion slices. Nice, even onion slices. So we're going to put about 2 tablespoons of the onion into the bowl. I'm not going to chop it anymore. I think it's okay as it is. That should be about right. So we're going to go with that. And then I will clean all that up later. A clean work surface, though, is very important. So don't forget to clean as you go, guys. Okay, guys, so we have added our chopped peppers, our chopped onions, and now we're going to add the final touches to make this casserole all come together. So I've added 8 ounces of cubed ham to the bowl, and I'm about to add a cup of milk. So if you didn't think this could get any richer, we're going to make it a little more rich with a cup of milk. So I've got my cup here, and we're just going to pour that into the casserole and give it a good old stir to get everything nice and combined, scraping the edges as we go along so that we don't miss any last bit of morsel on the side. Now I have to say, guys, this casserole is looking pretty gross, and I am not excited to be trying it. I am sorry, but I just cannot believe that people ate this in the 50s. That just looks so beyond disgusting to me. So what we're going to do now is transfer it to our casserole bowl so that we can heat it up in the oven. Casserole dish, not a bowl. It's in the bowl, but we're going to put it in a casserole dish. Now I've got a lidded casserole dish here. It doesn't give a size, which is interesting because most recipes usually tell you what size baker to use. But this one here is in this casserole dish that's kind of oval shaped. So I think that this should work out really well. So we're just going to pour this into the casserole bowl. Again, scraping the sides so that we don't lose any of that ham. Oh, yummy, yummy, yummy. This is something, you guys. I do not know about this. Woo! Okay, it all fit in the casserole dish, which is really good. We're just going to smooth the top out, make it extra fancy, and give a good tap to our spoon. And guys, that is it. We're going to take this to the oven. We're going to get the Jell-O mold out of the fridge. Well guys, that is it for me. I've got this casserole here that I'm off to put in the oven so it heats up a little bit before tonight's live. And I'll get that all ready to go and check the Jell-O in the fridge to see if it's set up yet. But I thank you guys for hanging around with me as I cook some 1950s recipes. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did, and I hope you'll watch me suffer through the nastiness tonight at 6:30 p.m. Eastern on my YouTube channel. I'll also be sharing some friend mail from Pamela Blanchard and some other neat things as well. So come on by, and I'll see you there. For now, stay in, stay safe, and binge YouTube.
That's why I go for that rock and roll music.